Okay, I bet you can hear me now. Hello, hello. Okay, can you hear me now? How about right now? You should be able to hear me. My audio shut itself off because I think there was, okay, so we're going to start again. Let's go back to the first slide. Okay, thank you everybody for your patience. I'm going to give us a 5-second pause, a little bit of a countdown, and then we're going to start again. Okay, if everybody's good with that, here goes the 5-second pause. Hello, my name is Lon Safko, and thank you for coming out today to another one of the wonderful Moscow Business College webinars. And today it's international marketing. And my job today is to take you through 2 or 3 semesters of marketing, and I got to do that in about 1 hour. As if marketing itself wasn't enough, we're going to make it international marketing and look at all the different things that are going to either help or hinder you as you try to market your product internationally. It really is a big category. So let's take a look at the next slide, which is my bio. My name is Lon Safko. I'm the author of the Social Media Bible, which hit #1 on Amazon. It was very successful, and I'm very grateful to say. I've also written the Fusion Marketing Bible, which hit #3 on Amazon. So I know a little bit about marketing. I also have 3 US patents on 3-dimensional internet advertising. I invented the first computer to save a human life, believe it or not. So I know how to market, and I've been doing it a really long time, and I love it more than anything. So let's jump in and start talking about marketing. Marketing. The first thing that you want to do is you want to make absolutely sure that your customers are willing to buy the product or service that you're trying to sell. Too many companies think that they got a great gadget, a great app, a great product, a great service, when in fact, their customers are lukewarm or don't really care about that product. So let me give you this practical example about the Social Media Bible. Back in 2007, they were the very early days of social media platforms. I did a SurveyMonkey survey to over 1,000 people. And I asked them, what do you want to see in a book on social media? It was the very early days. Some books were already published on social media. And I wanted to know what they wanted. So I can write a book in any format at all. So the survey came back and said, I want do's and don'ts, tips and tricks, a little bit of history. And basically, they gave me the format for the book. Well, here's the most important part of this slide. If you ask the customer what they will buy and you deliver that, they will buy it. It's just that simple. So when I wrote the book, I wrote it the way 1,000 people told me I should. And as a result, 4 days on Amazon and it hit #1. 3 editions, 5 languages. That's crazy. But I listened to the customers. So please be absolutely sure that before you launch a huge marketing campaign and you put in all that effort and all that money, that you've asked the customers what they want. Will they buy your product? How should you approach them, and how should you sell that product? Now, I'm not just saying you have to do a survey on SurveyMonkey. You can go out on Facebook and you can run some test videos. You can have a web page. You can do a questionnaire. You can do email, whatever you think is appropriate, the best way to get in touch with your prospects. But ask them, and they will tell you how to sell it to them. Really important. Another very, very important in the early stages of developing a marketing plan is to identify strategic partners, complementing, non-competing. Say it again, because that's important. Complementing, non-competing. If you can find a company that your product or service complements but doesn't compete with, then they are a potential strategic partner. Strategic partners are great ideas if you're going to sell inside your country or even outside, and especially outside. Developing a marketing channel, developing a huge list of prospects or a customer base is very, very expensive, especially outside of the country. The reason? You have geographic restrictions, you have time zones, you have cultural differences, communication problems like you've seen here today. So having a partner in that particular country rather, is really important. Now, here's the downside. Here's the where you have to pay for it. Generally, it's going to cost you about 50% of your net profit. Yeah, 50%. But you know what? Trying to recreate or build that channel is going to cost you much more than your 50% of your net profit. And if you look here over on the left, this is a magazine article that came out when I developed the first computer to save a human life, and I wanted to sell it in Scandinavia, Norway, Sweden, uh, and I partnered with Telnova. Telnova was the largest government agency inside of Sweden. Sweden is a socialist country, and the government runs everything. And they ran education and disability issues. And I partnered with them, and they had the channels. Yes, it cost me 50% of the net, but they did all the sales, and that was a wonderful partnership. If you look in the kind of on the lower bottom, just right of that image, where it says Google, that's one of my partners at one of my companies where we partnered with Google in Mountain View, California. Google is a huge partner. I didn't care if it cost me 50% of the net. If you look at the center photograph, the two guys on the right, not the short guy on the left, but the two guys on the right are my attorneys. And we actually, that's Microsoft's world headquarters in Redmond, Washington. In the picture behind, we partnered with Microsoft. And then, of course, if you see over on the right, that's a photograph I took as I was walking into the building at Apple in Cupertino to partner with them. Always look for a strategic partner, especially if you're going to do international marketing. They'll just make it a heck of a lot easier. You're gonna pay to pave your way into that country. Another thing that has to be a very strong part of your initial marketing program is free ink. Now, that's what we used to call it 20 years ago when there was no social platforms or internet where you can do advertising, but it's equally as important today because there's still a lot of people that listen to radio, watch television, read newspapers, read magazines. It's not as big as it used to be, but it's still huge. And the other thing is that it gives you an endorsement. When a newspaper writes an article about you, that means that they're excited enough to give up column inches, which means that it's an endorsement. So free ink is better than advertising. Advertising, everybody knows, if you pay for it, you got it. But when a radio show or a television news anchor is willing to do a feature on your product or your service, excellent. And most of them do. Remember, newspapers have to publish every day. News, television news, has to broadcast how many times a day? Like CNN, 24 hours a day. They're always looking for something new, fresh, and exciting that's going to excite their readers, their listeners. Now, free electrons. Now that we have access to the internet, we have access to all of these social platforms. Don't forget that. And I'm not just saying go out there and create a bunch of stuff yourself. We'll talk about that. But I'm talking about influential YouTube channels. A channel may have 1 million viewers. Contact that person. Tell them what you've done. See if you can't get them excited. If you can get them to do a video on you, then they're going to push it out to their channel. This is where it's really important. Not only is it an endorsement to their viewers, but keep in mind, if they have, let's say, 1 million or even 500,000 subscribers to their channel on YouTube, you just picked up 500,000 more contacts. You have been able to expose that product or that service to 500,000 people that you never would have had access to, and you do it in a way that looks like an endorsement. And the same for all of these, YouTube, LinkedIn, Snapchat. Find out who the influencers are and ask them if they'd be interested in doing some kind of a story. Again, bloggers are always looking for something fun, something exciting for their readers. So keep in mind, free electrons. And by the way, all of this so far hasn't cost anything at all. So now we got to look at the difference between free and paid, because we as a marketer have a responsibility to push out an awful lot of information. We have got to go everywhere. We've got to be on LinkedIn. We've got to be on Facebook. We have to be on YouTube and Twitter and Snapchat and everywhere, and traditional. So this is where your marketing plan is going to kind of split. On one side, you're going to have all of the free stuff that you can do, like we talked about, creating a lot of content yourself, pushing it out on your own channels. And then on the other side, you're going to have paid. And trust me, today, with the difficulty of marketing and the fact that we are marketing globally, you have to do paid, and you have to have a considerable budget to launch any kind of a product if you're going to do it globally, which is, I would recommend, do it locally first and test it, work it out, and then start spreading to other areas. Don't try it all at once. But you're going to have to make the decision at one point, how much are you going to spend on newspaper advertising, television advertising, on Facebook ads, on Google AdWords? These are all integral questions that you have to ask. Okay, I switched the camera on. It was on, and somehow it got shut off. We're having a little bit of connection difficulties today. Don't know why. Maybe because it's foggy here today. Okay. Okay, the next step, you got to analyze. You got to look at all the analytics. You have to see what's taking place out there, where you're successful, who's looking at what. You've heard the old adage, you can't manage what you don't measure. And marketers, I'm guilty too, we don't want to measure. Part of the reason is we don't know how. Another reason is we never set it up properly so that we could measure it. For example, we took out a newspaper ad, but we didn't push it in through the internet, so there's no way of telling what the response rate was, what the conversion rate was for that newspaper ad. So we're bad at that. And if we're working in an agency, we don't want to measure because we don't want our clients to see what a bad job we're doing. And it's always going to be perceived as a bad job because we're always going to spend a lot of money, do a lot of work, and not see a lot of return. And that's part of the problem right now with marketing throughout the world. It's very difficult, more so than I have ever seen in my lifetime. It's more expensive, it requires more effort, and the return is lower than it's ever been. That's one of the biggest problems. Now, if you're spending time and you're spending money, then you're going to need to know how you're spending it and where is the greatest return on investment, the ROI. But if you don't know, if you're not managing it, if you're not measuring it, how do you know? Throwing more money at a Google AdWord campaign and hoping that you're going to get better results. Albert Einstein had a phrase for that, and what he said was, doing the same thing the same way and expecting different results. That's the definition of insanity. And that's what we do as marketers. We throw more money at it, hoping that it's going to be more successful. It doesn't work that way anymore. We have to measure everything. So look at Google Analytics, look at Google Trends, look at the YouTube Analytics, look at Facebook Analytics. The great thing is every single one of these platforms has a terrific set of analytics that are built right into it. So you can manage and measure every single thing, but you have to be aware of it, and it has to be set up properly the first time and ahead of time. Another thing that people overlook, and most marketers never even heard of, is web reports. If you have a website and you have traffic, how come you're not doing the analytics on that? It's unbelievable. You can tell how many people came in on Chrome, how many came in on Safari, how many were running Windows, how many were on Mac, how many were on mobile. That's a key thing. Mobile is increasing dramatically. How many people came from what regions of the world, what countries, what states, like in the United States or like Russia. So if you don't know how to access your web reports, talk to your IT guy and get them to set it up for you. What they'll do is create a web page. All you have to do is put in a username and a password, and this unbelievable amount of wonderful data will pop out of all the traffic that you've had, how long they stayed on your website, whether it was sticky or not, when they went to the homepage, where did they go, what was their referring link, did they come in off of Google, did they come in off of a blog? Unbelievable amounts of information. But most marketers have never heard of web reports. Get your IT person to set that up for you, please. Okay? Cyber surveillance. For the first time in history, we have a responsibility to ourselves personally and to the companies that we're working for to listen to the conversations that are taking place about us. I'm going to pause for effect. What that means is you need to be aware of every conversation that takes place on every single social platform about your company, your company's officers, employees, your products, your services, and you, because you don't know what's being said about you. So if you do know, then you can respond quickly. If it's negative, you can diffuse it. If it's positive, you can encourage it and participate in the conversation. You have to be able to diffuse anything negative. And when you work with a large amount of customers, it's inevitable that negative things are going to be said. Most of the time, almost always, it's a misunderstanding. But if that person gets out on the internet and starts trashing you, bad talking, your company, your product or service, the prospects don't know that. Sometimes customers are just plain crazy and you need to diffuse that. But you won't know if you're not listening. For example, I have about 30 Google alerts set. Every single morning, I open up my email and here's about 30 different responses. People talking about me on Facebook, people saying something in a blog, something on an e-commerce website. Gives me a chance to be one of the first or second people to that website, comment on the blog, thank the person for the review, put in my 2 cents, and participate in that conversation. So Google Alerts, and I gave you a list over on the left-hand side of some of the largest largest companies now that will help you actually identify any conversation that's taking place. Pretty cool, huh? Listen to the conversations. So I just want to make sure we go to the next one. There. Okay, let's talk about growth patterns. I'm going to read some of these bullets so that we can discuss them. From now until 2021, worldwide, e-commerce sales will grow nearly 246%, from 1.3 trillion to 4.5 trillion. I just want you to think about that for a second. Over the next 3-4 years, we're going to see a 3.5 or a 3.2 trillion dollar increase. Of course, that's US dollars, so you can do the conversion to rubles. That's a lot of money. That's a huge increase. So that means that if you have a product or service, you have to be involved in some type of an e-commerce solution. I have 2 companies that are e-commerce solution based. Next, 83% of shoppers in Canada, 81% in Brazil, and 78% in Mexico buy from sellers across international borders. Now that's on the North American continent. Europe is going to be the same way. Human nature is human nature. So if you're seeing that 78 to 83% of the citizens of these countries are buying outside of the country, you got to assume that the people from Russia are going to do the same thing. Or if you're marketing into these countries, that 80% of the population is a legitimate demographic for you. Huge. Another strong reason to really embrace global e-commerce. And in the United States, nearly 47% of shoppers purchase from merchants outside of the United States. That's a big deal. So you have to pay attention to that. World marketplaces. Now, in the United States, we have something called Small Business Administration. It's a government entity that helps build small businesses, and they do a lot of legitimate, good surveys. 96% of the world's consumers now live outside of the United States. So it probably means that 96% of your consumers live outside of Russia. It tends to make sense. Think of the size of the world population, and you'll realize the overall demographic that you have to market to. It's huge. 2/3 of the world's purchasing power is based in foreign countries. Yeah, no kidding. Huge amounts. In 2017, International Post Corporation surveyed 29,000 international customers. Here's what they found. It showed that in 30 countries, 53% of all international e-commerce purchases went through 3 marketplaces. This is key. This is really important. 53%, more than half of all purchases worldwide, either come out of Amazon, Alibaba, or eBay. Amazon, Alibaba, or eBay. That's crazy. Oh, half. So what is that telling you? It tells you that if you have any type of a product, you seriously have to look at these three places. I buy almost everything from Amazon. It's so easy. I get it the next day or within 2 days in the US. No shipping is free. I mean, it's really great. So that's an important thing. Customers who make international purchases are in a safe and familiar environment. That's another thing. You don't want to buy from a company outside of your country because you don't know anything about them. You don't know if they're ever going to ship your product and just take your money. You don't know if they're going to use your credit card for fraud. But if you purchase through these three companies, you do know that you are safe, that you have a good return policy, that they will protect your credit card. That's a huge deal. It really is. Smaller e-commerce companies turn to the same three marketplaces above to support their international selling. Yeah, it's great for every size company, whether you're small, medium, or a Fortune 500, one of the largest companies in your country. These marketplaces also solve currency conversion issues. We'll talk about that up in the next slide. Currency is a huge issue as well. Collecting credit cards, not getting your card stolen, your card information. It's really a kind of a big deal. And having that solution right there, that's another reason to go with one of those three big ones. Currency exchange. Again, big problem. When you're exchanging currency between countries, it depends on the moment that that transaction happened. Because as you know, currencies go up and down and the relationship goes up and down. So someday that same sale will make you an extra profit, and other days that same sale will make you less of a profit. The other thing is that exchanging currency outside of Amazon, Alibaba, and eBay, if you're going to sell direct, you're going to have to deal with all the fraudulent credit cards. And I hate to say it, but on my websites, I've turned off every single country except for the United States. We had way, way too much fraud. And I hate to tell you, this is a secret, but we had more fraud from Russia than any other country in the world. So if we have a country, an individual, a customer who wants to buy something from outside of the United States, I tell them, connect with my PayPal account, pay me ahead of time, and then we'll ship you the product. That's the only way that we found that we can get around it. Western Union, way too expensive. They take 12% off the top. That's stupid. PayPal is really one of the best solutions, but here's a list of countries that they won't sell into, they won't deal with. And I don't blame them because there's no guarantee that you're ever going to get paid if you sell into these countries. I've had a huge problem. I was an adjunct professor for the International School of Business in Hyderabad, India, which is the third highest rated university in the country, in the world. And I spent a lot of time in India. So I would come home with Indian money. And Bank America, which is one of the largest banks in America, would take money from any country in the world. And about 4 years ago, I walked into the bank with a handful of rupees, and they're like, no, we're not going to touch it, throw it away. And I ended up giving it to my grandkids to play with. The counterfeit rate in India is so high that the banks won't take a chance with them any longer. So you got to be, as a marketer, I know, oh yeah, that's sales and that's finance. No, you got to be aware of that. It has to be part of your plan. Now, Payoneer is a company that is trying to kind of work around that. It's kind of like a credit card where you can connect it with your e-commerce site. So they're not 100% yet, but I want you to keep an eye on this company, Payoneer, because they may be the next big solution. They're going to compete with PayPal. Now, no presentation that talks about marketing and finance would be complete without talking about blockchain and Bitcoin. If you don't completely understand it, I strongly recommend that you go and you Google it and find out more about it. It's here. It's big. I don't know what its future is. Let me give you an opinion. A country's currency is one of the most important things to any country. If the currency is damaged, if the currency gets devalued, the country goes into a terrible depression. We can't allow, no country can allow anything to jeopardize its currency. Blockchain and Bitcoin is doing just that. It's an international electronic currency. Right now, there's a lot of people participating that it's going to become more prevalent. The problem right now with Bitcoin is that nobody's accepting it. Very few companies are actually accepting Bitcoin. And that's what's keeping it under control. My opinion is that once Bitcoin, if it does continue to catch on, there will be a war from every country to protect its currency against Bitcoin. So I don't know. I'd say keep an eye on it. If you want to take a chance of participating in it, go for it. But my recommendation is, yeah, keep it at arm's length for right now. And then this is a little bit more information on Bitcoin side of it. I wanted to by the way, if you want these slides, I make them available. They're on lonsafko.com. You see it on the bottom of the website. Go to Lon Safko, click on the little button that says Get Access, put your email address in, I'll send you a password. But give me a couple of minutes, because I didn't put the slides up yet, but I will put them up within a few minutes of when this presentation is over. And then you can have all this, because there's a lot of slides here. You just don't have the time to go through. Okay. That's my phone going off. International manufacturing and distribution. Now, I know that you're saying to yourself, this absolutely has nothing to do, excuse me. I know that you're thinking that this has absolutely nothing to do with marketing, but in fact it does, because it's about delivering the product to your customers. So if you're getting your product manufactured in China and you're delivering in Russia, how are you going to do that? Is the company in China going to manufacture your product and then mail it to people in Russia? Are they going to do the fulfillment? Yeah, probably not. Or do you have to buy an entire container and then warehouse it and pay for it? And then how fast can your customers get it? You know, right now, if you're buying something out of China, you're lucky to get it within a month. But if you buy it here in the US from Amazon, I can get it the very next day. So that's something as a marketer that we need to be aware of, because our customers are going to want to know that they need answers to those questions. So what is the distribution? What is the fulfillment? How do we get it from manufacturing to warehouse to shipping and then into the hands of our customers? Kind of a big deal. So you have to ask that question. And again, I'll leave this out there. Go get those slides. You can read the rest of the details, because we still have a lot of information to cover here. English language. Well, you can see that we have two separate rooms going inside this webinar today, one in Russian, one in English. Like it or not, English is the global language of business. It really is. Again, I've presented in almost every country in the world practically. In China, Singapore, Kuala Lumpur, Bangkok, Hyderabad, Mumbai, Delhi, Vienna, everywhere. I have not had to have an interpreter in any of those countries, except for Italy. Italy was the only other country that I needed an interpreter for. But every other country that I spoke to in the last 10 years, I was able to do it in English. If you're going to work in marketing on a global scale, you have to understand English. Every web page is based on English. The programming languages are based in English. Business is done in English. Nearly every country in the world speaks English. Asia, India, China, Europe. Out of the world's population of 7.5 billion, 1.5 billion people speak English. That's 20% or 1/5 of the Earth's population. So I hate to say it, if you're going to market globally, you have to be good at English. It's just that important. Outsourcing. There's going to come a point where you're going to have to outsource. There's going to be maybe a lot of repetitive tasks. Maybe you're going to want to tap into some talented people that you don't have on staff or that you don't want to hire. Maybe it's just for a particular program or a particular project. I outsource all the time. Fiverr, believe it or not, while most of the people are incompetent, there's a lot of really good talent out there. Upwork, also the same way, a little higher caliber of people on Upwork. And once you identify some of these people that are really good at graphics, really good at book layout, really good at marketing pieces, you keep their name and you go back to them because the prices are very inexpensive. Now, I've been outsourcing for almost 20 years. Back in the early 2000s, I had 3 engineers from Russia. They were amazing graphic artists for papermodelsonline.com, and they created these school projects for me. And we would go into Second Life, yeah, believe it or not, Second Life, and we would have our meetings. Our avatars would talk back and forth. Sometimes we would use Skype, and they worked for me for almost 10 years, even though they were actually, you see here, one was in the Ukraine, one was in Moscow, and the other was in Vladivostok over on the eastern side. Incredible. They were less expensive than American counterparts, and their product was absolutely much better. And that was a 10-year relationship. So make part of your marketing plan outsourcing because eventually you're going to need help. Okay, selling into foreign countries. You're going to have products and services. That's the 2 major categories. Of those, services is a virtual product. A product can be a virtual product or an actual tangible product. So every one of them is kind of handled a little bit differently. For example, if you're selling software into Australia, there's laws, there's very strict taxation laws. If you're selling, well, papermodelsonline.com sells school projects. Either you can download a PDF of a school project, say for example, St. Peter's Cathedral in Moscow. If you want that product, you can download it as a PDF, print it yourself and build it, or we will print it for you and ship it. So it can either be a virtual product or a tangible product. The taxation is completely different, and that's going to affect the bottom line or the price, the end price to the end user. You need to understand that. There's going to be laws and there's going to be restrictions. Can you actually ship your product, if it's a tangible product, into that country? For example, people in America love to buy Italian cheese, but you can't ship Italian cheese into the United States unless you're a licensed importer. So you can buy it, but you can't get it into the United States. Wow, isn't that going to be a huge problem for your product or service if there's a restriction? Another thing is I speak in Dubai quite often, and I like a drink. I like a glass of wine or something at the end of the day. I've worked hard, and I enjoy a little bit of alcohol. Well, Dubai is dry. Any other country that I fly to, I'll throw some tiny wines in my suitcase. So at the end of the day, I can kick back, have some dinner, drink a little bit of wine. I don't do that when I go to Dubai. That is a dry country. They are real serious about alcohol. So I don't want to get caught at customs smuggling in alcohol. So there's a product. If you're selling anything that isn't halal into a Muslim country, you're going to have problems. So these are the types of things as marketers, believe it or not, we need to be aware of. So get aware of it. And then here's some other examples of shipping. There's customs, duties, regulations, what's prohibited, what's restricted, paperwork previously owned. If you can prove with receipts that you previously purchased something that you're coming into Australia with, but you got to bring receipts, you don't get taxed. But if you can't prove it, you get taxed. What the heck is that all about? That's absolutely crazy. Also, in the United States, I won't sell to Canada. Canada is the country just above us to the north because customs is so difficult. I'll sell virtual products, but I won't ship a pre-printed tangible product. Customs is miserable. So you need to be aware. Guys doing okay? You hanging in there? All right, good. Corporate citizenship, where your company is based. If your company is based in Russia, you're going to have all of the laws and restrictions and citizenship and taxes of being a Russian company. If you ship outside of Russia into another country, you're going to have to deal with all of that as well. And again, remember, that's going to make it difficult as us as marketers to sell into those countries if those taxes and restrictions are prohibitive. Sometimes you might even have to pay double taxes on the product. The tax because the sale actually took place in that country, and a tax in Russia because that's where your company is based and that's where the capital gains are based out of. So again, marketing is not just about understanding everything in marketing, it's about understanding the big picture. So yeah, corporate taxes. I'll give you an example within the United States. My company is based out of Arizona, a separate state. I live in California. I file my taxes with the state of Arizona. The state of California says if I live in California, I am managing the company, the Arizona company in California, and I have to pay all the corporate taxes that California demands in addition to all the taxes that Arizona demands. Wow, that's messed up. And that also is going to affect the final price of my product to my customers. Okay, credit card. We talked a little bit about this before. Credit card fraud is huge. My company gets hit with it at least once or twice a month. PayPal flags the card as good. The card has been stolen. The customer doesn't realize it. Somebody places a large order with my company. Here's what happens. The credit card companies always side with the customers. They always do. And the reason is they're making money off the customers. They're not making money off of the stores, off of the sellers. So they don't want to make the cardholder angry. In America, it costs about $150 to gain one credit card customer. A credit card company has to spend cost of customer acquisition, about 150 US for every new customer they sign up for their credit cards. They don't want to incur losing that customer and incur that cost again. So what happens is twice a month, we get hit with a bad credit card. PayPal approves it. We ship the product. PayPal then finds out later that the card is fraudulent. They come back, they reverse all the charges so that we have to pay PayPal back all the money for the product, and we pay a $20 fine. How do you like that? It's not even our fault. And we lose our product. And it happens about once a month. So that's a shortage that you have to plan and be aware of. All right, what else we got here? You keeping up here? Got a lot of stuff going on here. Okay, international communications. How are you going to communicate with your customers? Are you going to do it through an automated chatbot? Okay for first line of help, but not in the long run. Are you going to do an on-screen chat, a live chat? You're going to have to hire people to do that. Zendesk is awesome for that, but there's a big cost associated with it. Are you going to work with people on Slack or Skype? I don't know. You have to figure that out. How do you communicate with your customers? How do you do customer support? Is it going to be just through email? These are questions as a marketer you have to ask, because remember, it's your job as the marketing person to understand how to connect prospects to your company, to convert them to customers, and then keep them as happy customers. If a customer becomes unhappy, there was a study done in the 80s that said a happy customer will tell between 5 and 7 people about a good experience. An unhappy customer will tell 15 to 17 people about a bad experience. And that's no longer true. An unhappy customer won't tell 15 people. They'll tell 1,500 people, or they'll tell 15,000 people about their bad experience. So customer service is more critical. And I'm going to say this, and you're going to think I'm crazy. Marketing and customer service either has to be in the same department or they have to work side by side. Because if customer service can turn an angry customer into a happy customer, that's the best marketing tool you have, because that happy customer will go out and tell 10, 15, 20 people or even 100 people if they blog. So keep that in mind as well. Now, you also have to look at the technologies. I like to use Skype a lot. Here's the problem with Skype. It doesn't work in a lot of parts of the country. It doesn't work in the Middle East. The Middle East owns the telecommunications companies. Let's say Abu Dhabi. They own the telecommunications company. They're not going to let you use a free internet communication tool. So they actually block it in that country. So you got to be aware of it. I know, crazy, huh? All these things we got to think of. Privacy, if you're selling and you're using email, or if you're collecting any kind of information about your customers, I know you've heard about the GDPR. It was just passed in April of this year, changed the way we do business. There are teeth in that law. They will fine you. They will block you. You have to follow those rules. And we've had almost the same rules back in 2004 in the United States. It was called the CAN-SPAM Act. And what it means basically is spam is an unsolicited commercial message. Unsolicited commercial message. So you got to be very careful that your customers have double opted in, that they've chosen to be communicated with you, and that they've told you a second time that it's okay. Double opt in. And you have to protect their privacy. You can't sell lists, or there will be consequences. So you have to be familiar. You have to read the 2004 CAN-SPAM Act. You have to read the GDPR and understand all the rules that go along with it if you're going to market. And if you don't know who is in the EU, which I didn't really know, so I provided this list to you. The United Kingdom in June of 2016 voted to leave the EU, but they haven't left yet. So I'm not really sure what's going on there. That's why I put a plus or minus. But those are the other countries that are still currently in the EU. And I don't see you guys there. So there may be some issues selling and marketing between EU countries and non-EU countries. And then here's just a quick rundown. Democracy and monarchy, I don't have any trouble selling into. They like capitalism. The rest of it, republic, communist, socialist, dictatorship, not going to happen. Very, very cautious. A lot of times they don't respect the laws and the rules of other countries. If you're going to market internationally, you have to be aware of the culture. For example, even though India, English is taught as the first language, there's 17 dialects of Hindi. In Bangkok, I went in for a McDonald's breakfast, and I was really looking towards an Egg McMuffin. There was no Egg McMuffins. There was some kind of a fried egg thrown over a heap of rice. Okay, that's big in Thailand, but was not real big on my list. And the other thing is that when social media came out, the competition for social media became so strong in the United States. I just said the heck with it, and I marketed myself throughout the rest of the world, except for the United States, because it was an easier market to tap. So keep that in mind. Just because you're a Russian-based country, maybe there's too much competition. Maybe not. Translation versus localization. Now, there's some jokes in here. We're going to wrap this up and I'll open it up to question and answer. I'll turn on my speakers here in a minute. Just because it's translated doesn't mean that it's localized. You've seen Google Translation. You've seen what a terrible job. And if you don't believe me, just type in Google Translate, type something in a sentence in Russian, convert it to English, take the English sentence and convert it back to Russian and see what it looks like. There's the problem. And I know that if you guys got IKEA in your country, you know that the instructions will make you cry within the first 15 minutes because no one has it translated really well into Russian. And that's the truth in the US. Stuff that comes out of China, oh my gosh, please have an English first person just translate those one time because they're terrible translations. And a lot of times it kind of can backfire on you. For an example, my son was the HR director and head of the consumer credit, the credit card department for Macy's, the big retailer here in the United States. And they were calling on a delinquent credit card. The woman hadn't made a payment. And the gentleman asked, well, how come you haven't made the payment? And the woman said, well, because I recently lost my husband. And, and the person from India says, well, I will put you on hold while you go find him. Well, in the United States, when you lose somebody, that generally means that they died. So it was like a really bad insult. And that was about all Macy's can take. And they ended up firing the company because of it. So translation versus localization. Make sure that you have somebody who really can translate it properly for you. Okay. Let me give you one example, and then I'll let you see. I put about 10 of them in here, and they're kind of funny. Here's one where Ford found that in Belgium, they were trying to get people to buy their car, and it said, every car has a high quality body. But when it translated into Belgium, it said every car has a high quality corpse. So they thought that there were dead bodies in the trunk. That didn't work out. There's a bunch of these that I thought were hysterical. Give me a couple of minutes at the end of this. I will put the slides up. Go to lonsafko.com, get the slides, click on Get Access, and you can download the slides and you can read about 10 or 12 other examples. Right now, we're about on time. It's about 5 after 9. We've got a few minutes for question and answers. I'm going to, you know what? I'm not going to turn my speaker on, but what I am going to do is watch the chat box. If anything comes in from English, I'll see it. If anything comes in from Russian window, the Russian room, the translator can type it in the bottom. But now's your chance to ask any question that you ever had about international marketing, and you get it answered for free. Also, these slides, this presentation will be available at the Moscow Business College on demand. So if you want to review and see this again or recommend it to a friend, by all means, get in touch with the people over at Moscow Business College and get the links. And you can either view it in English or you can view it in Russian. Okay, where's my translator with questions? Come on, guys. We'll give you another minute, and if there's no other questions, then we're going to wrap this up. You must have one question. I covered an awful lot of material over the last hour. Okay, let me just check the Russian room. A lot of comments, but I can't read them. Sorry. Okay, well, then with that, let's wrap this up. If you have any questions, if you think of any questions after we conclude this webinar, by all means, contact the Moscow Business College, or feel free to contact me at my website, lonsafko.com. In the meantime, I want to thank each and every one of you for dealing with the little technical issues that we've had. That's what happens when you try to communicate with your customers around the world. I think you heard that somewhere. But thank you for your patience, and thanks for coming out today to listen to this. And I particularly like to thank the Moscow Business College for hosting this today. Thank you very much. And I am excited about doing more work with you and answering any questions that you may have. So in the meantime, stay well.